Hi, welcome to Comic Talk. I'm Joshua.
And I just saved a ton of money on groceries by switching to food stamps.
Good plan. This is our review of Grant Morrison and Chris Burnham's Nameless. This is an Image title that came out last year, and we read it. Cue the thingy.
This episode is, of course, brought to you by the good folks at Sidekick, because all the best heroes have a sidekick.
Awesome. So we read this. It's a 6-issue miniseries by Grant Morrison and Chris Burnham with, by the way, coloring by Fairbairn.
Fairbairn, yeah.
Which we have seen before and liked his work.
Yeah, Bjorn. He's a good guy.
Yeah, Bjorn Fairbairn, also known as Nathan. So, do we dare try to describe what this is before we start talking about it?
There's a lot of stuff going on, and I'm not sure. I mean, I got to the end, and I wasn't sure what actually happened and what was like Crazy Town LSD brain imaginings.
Yeah, this borders on the ravings of a lunatic. It's
yeah.
It's hard to follow, and I'm not sure if you're necessarily supposed to follow it 100%. No.
I think that's part of Morrison's horror take. Is you generally there's like that sense of confusion in it. Mm-hmm. It kind of reminds me of like William S. Burroughs or something like that, where the fact that you don't know what's going on is just part of the effect.
Right.
I kind of wonder sometimes if Morrison knows what the fuck's going on. Like if he actually has all this stuff planned out and then just cut out the details that would clue you in, or if he just like throws out some random shit sometimes and is like, fucking deal with it.
Yeah. This is a complete just fan theory on my part, I suppose.
Sure.
But I feel like this is a rejected Hellblazer story.
You think so?
I really think so. I feel like this character and his occult background and being drug into this crazy story, it feels to me like Grant Morrison doing a John Constantine story.
Except for, I mean, there's a big space part to it. Like,
sure.
I mean, all of it really, like even on the surface level and then like as you find out more. And I don't usually associate Constantine with that sort of thing, but everything else, like, absolutely. Even the way that some of the fantastical shit is drawn looks like it would be something out of, like, a Constantine book.
Yeah, and it feels to me like Grant Morrison's pitch of what would it be like if Grant Morrison had to go on a space adventure. Or not Grant Morrison, John Constantine had to go on an adventure in space. Like, which I think is kind of a decent synopsis of what this is. It's like Grant Morrison's take on John Constantine in space, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's fair. It's fucking as weird as it sounds.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And so this thing, it takes a lot of meandering turns, right? It kind of just floats around as a story in a way, if that isn't a reasonable way to describe it.
I think float is maybe too soft of an adjective. You get jerked around a lot.
Yeah, you're probably right. It just takes a lot of left and right turns, and you're never really on solid ground with what, like you said, what's real and what's not, what did happen, what didn't happen, right? So...
And it's like every time you learn something, you question something that you thought you knew.
Right.
You know, it's like it's a very clever way of, I guess, progressing a story and maintaining that sense of I don't know what the fuck's going on. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, you have to learn stuff because the story's progressing, but then we'll just fuck up the shit back here, and then yeah, and
it takes a strange path too, because like the first issue is just about the guy Nameless, and by the end, I don't even know if that issue really happened at all. Yeah. Or if maybe that's the one thing that did kind of happen. Mm-hmm. But like, so at the end of that issue, then we pivot on into the space story. Like, oh, now they're going to space. Mm-hmm. And so we get like a couple issues where he's in space and then it just pivots right back down again to was he ever in space?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
well, I think he's in space. I think in every issue. I think so.
yeah,
Maybe in number 4 he wasn't. Maybe, but yeah, there's usually space scenes. But yeah, you definitely. I mean, it introduces all of those things that are happening like on solid ground, and you're kind of wondering like where those actually occur in the timeline, and then at a certain point you wonder if they occurred in the timeline. Yeah. So
right.
I don't know if it's like a before thing or an after thing or what the hell.
Well, and I mean, like, but from the perspective of the reader, when you're reading the first, like, issue, I mean, like, 2 through 4, maybe, you feel pretty grounded in the idea that you're actually doing this stuff in space. Like, that it's a linear story being told about this guy with all this occult information being taken on a space adventure. But I think you're right. Like, around issue 4, it turns back around and it starts making you question, like, the last couple of issues, right? Like, you start wondering, like, how much of that was just, like, imagined or implanted information, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's weird. It's a strange read. I haven't read anything quite this subversive in terms of fucking with the reader and with the narrative, right?
And it manages to be like so nihilistic at the same time, you know. And I almost thought that there was a certain point, because there's a lot of questions of like, what is God, what is man, and stuff, and they're talking about this being who like goes through and just, you know, implants things like here or there, and, you know, we have no fucking control over it, and what do you call that person? And I thought that was going to be like the classic Grant Morrison, like the writer as a character like in comic books, but then it wasn't.
Or was it? I mean,
that's
what's so strange about it, is that it doesn't answer really any of the questions that it asks or that it brings up. It just gives them to you and then forces you to try to deal with them as a reader instead of...
Sometimes you'll get like multiple perspectives on like a single question and stuff, but yeah, there's no definite answers in anything in this.
Yeah, it's
just like life.
It's quite strange. There's also, like, there's no real ending. I mean, you could say it kind of ends, I suppose, but it's just over.
Yeah,
really
stops.
is a better way to put it. You know, it's... I guess what I mean is it doesn't... It never tells you the answer to what the hell was going on. You know, it kind of ends
it
because,
kinda does.
you know, it sort of...
But again, those expository things kind of happen in scenes where you're going to have to question their legitimacy and stuff. But there is the bit about, you know, the war between the Titans and the Outsiders, and like the... I think you call it like the antimatter universe or something. It was the equivalent of that. And,
right.
Yeah. So there's that.
Yeah, and it just... but it's just not a classic, like, narrative. There's nothing about it that feels like first act, second act, third act. In fact, it's not even really... Aside from, like, the prologue of issue 1, there's no, like, classic, like, act structure to the story anyhow. There's maybe a loose first act, like I was talking about with issue 2 and 3, where you feel like
pretty grounded and
like you're following a narrative. But then as soon as it breaks loose from there, it just transitions into strangeness for another 3 issues of like unraveling. Like the whole thing just unravels in front of you, and then you're done. Like it all kind of comes apart, and then it's over.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about the art a little bit, because I don't know how many more ways we can say this shit's fucking confusing. What did you think?
I liked it quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, me too.
It had some really cool stuff with the panel work, I thought, especially in the middle episodes. Why do I keep calling them episodes? The middle issues, when they were down like on the little moon base, they did a lot of stuff to really make everything feel confined and tight that I thought was really cool, with the way that they laid out the panels, and they would like when they were in like the little pod room, they had like this oval in the middle.
Yeah.
And everyone was kind of cramped into it, like hunched down to like so they could be in panel. It was a strange effect, but it did a really good job of making you feel the claustrophobia that he kind of felt.
For sure.
And there was a lot of that sort of stuff. And we see the opposite later when we get these grand vistas and it breaks open and gives us large panels to show us space. And
and somebody just following through it endlessly and stuff. Yeah. There's some very graphic scenes in here that were like, they were crazy. It had definite high moments. I would say as a whole, it was still pretty consistently good, though. I mean, you can definitely tell certain panels and stuff had a little bit more work than others, but yeah, the standard that it set for itself was pretty high. Like, there was plenty of detail work. There was plenty of movement. There were, like, little bits of visual humor and, like, a couple issues, just a little bit to break it up. It's pretty masterful, honestly.
Yeah, I like it. And I also like just the art style itself. It had a cool look to it that is reminiscent of a lot of different people that I like, but didn't feel like just a carbon copy of their style.
Right.
It had a really cool look, and it matches well with Grant Morrison's writing and tone, I think.
Yeah, it definitely felt familiar, but I wouldn't say, like, this looks like this person.
Right.
Yeah, or even a combination of, like, this person and this person.
Right, yeah. I feel like it's really, like, it looks like Chris Burnham, which is cool. I always like that with an artist when they seem to have developed their own style that you can see their influence without it like overtaking it. I thought it was cool stuff.
So, who would you recommend this to?
Good question. I think horror fans, really, which kind of surprised me. I didn't expect for it to end up being like a Clive Barker sort of thing, but I would almost compare it to a lot of Clive Barker works, like old Hellbound Heart, and that just those sort of stories that are a lot of the horror aspect, like you were saying, comes from like not knowing what's going on, or like the confusion of life and earth and existence. 'Cause it's existential horror, I think is the term. I don't know if necessarily like your average sci-fi fan would really be into this.
No, I don't think necessarily, unless they're into like space horror movies. But also, I think people just generally a fan of like the more cerebral kind of films and stuff. I think would be really, really big fans of this.
Yeah, this reminded me of that one like space horror film where it was the very first ship to like warp jump, and then they go find it, and it like went through hell. Have you ever seen that?
No idea.
Oh man, what is that called? I can't think of it. I'll just have to skip it. But it reminded me a lot of it. It had a lot of the same kind of themes where, like, this search, this science search, the bounds of science and taking it too far and like stumbling across stuff you're not supposed to and turning out to be hellish. There's also a lot of weird stuff with this one in terms of, like you were saying, like heaven and hell and God and these existential questions about religious matters. That I think maybe people that are a little too closely attached to religious concepts are not really going to enjoy it. If you're, a pretty standard Christian believer, that kind of thing, I don't think you'll like it. Honestly, I think you might find it a little bit offensive. But if you're into subversive religious stuff, it's definitely doing that.
For sure.
I think that's pretty much it then. That'll wrap it up for this episode. If you like Grant Morrison, you like weird horror, existential stuff.
And you like sidekicks.
You'll probably like Nameless. Yeah, tell them a little bit about that sidekick, Drew.
Every good hero has a sidekick. This is a masterpiece of modern technology. It has a game called Pump Jack and 3 different types of instant messenger. You have AOL Instant Messenger and MSN and Yahoo. So no matter what your friends use, you always get a hold of them.
Wow, that's great, because I know a lot of times on the different devices I use, sometimes they'll only have AOL Instant Messenger, and I can't get a hold of my friends that are using Yahoo. So this is a great device for that if you have a lot of friends using different messenger services.
Absolutely.
That's great. Show them that sidekick. Great. Well, make sure and come back with us next week when we talk about our favorite and least favorite stuff from March. Because this is April right now that we are living in. So currently at this time, unless you're watching this later, and then what you're watching, we were in April, but you're not. So don't get too caught up on that, because that can get confusing.
April of 2016.
2016 for all of you people, all of you future viewers. We will be talking about our favorite and least favorite stuff from March. That will be next Monday. That'll come out. And every Wednesday we do a review of the stuff on our poll list. It's usually anywhere from 3 to 6 issues, and we talk it out.
Yeah, we sort through the issues.
Sort through all those issues that we have.
Later.
Bye.